Tim was a young boy who lived in a small town surrounded by rolling green hills, vast meadows, and a calm, sparkling river that snaked its way through the valley. The town was peaceful, a place where everyone knew each other by name and shared warm smiles. Tim's family lived in a cozy, white house with a bright red roof and a charming little garden where colorful flowers bloomed in every season. Yet Tim's favorite place was not his own home. It was his grandfather's old house at the very end of their street. Grandpa Joe's house was different. It was older, with creaky wooden floors that groaned underfoot, and rooms that smelled faintly of dust, old books, and peppermint candy. Sunlight streamed in through stained glass windows, leaving soft pools of color on the floor. A large wooden bookshelf covered one wall of the living room, its shelves full of leather-bound books that seemed to whisper stories of long-forgotten adventures. Tim visited Grandpa Joe's house every day after school. Grandpa Joe would always welcome him with a warm smile, a gentle hug, and a plate of homemade cookies, the kind with chocolate chips that melted in his mouth. Tim loved spending hours listening to Grandpa Joe's stories. His grandfather had once been an adventurer, traveling to distant lands when he was young. He told tales of deserts with golden sands, cities with towers that touched the clouds, and jungles alive with strange animals and ancient ruins. But there was one thing in Grandpa Joe's house that had fascinated Tim since he was a little boy: a large wooden chest that sat in the corner of the living room. It was dark brown, its surface scratched and aged by time. The brass lock on the front was tarnished, and the chest was always covered with a fine layer of dust, as though it hadn't been touched in years. One rainy afternoon, while the two of them sat by the fireplace sipping tea, Tim finally asked the question that had been on his mind for years. "Grandpa, what's inside that old chest?" Tim asked, pointing to it. Grandpa Joe's blue eyes twinkled, and a mischievous smile curled on his lips. "Ah, the chest," he said, his voice low and mysterious. "That chest holds my greatest treasure, Tim." "A treasure?" Tim's eyes grew wide with excitement. "What kind of treasure? Gold, jewels, maps to hidden islands?" Grandpa Joe chuckled softly and leaned back in his worn armchair. "It's much more valuable than gold or jewels. But there's one problem. I lost the key many years ago. Without the key, the treasure stays locked away." Tim couldn't stop staring at the chest. What kind of treasure was inside? His imagination raced. Perhaps it was filled with coins that glittered like the sun, or maps that led to pirate treasure buried deep underground. That night, as the rain tapped against his bedroom window, Tim lay awake imagining all the possibilities. The next day after school, Tim made a decision. He would find the lost key and unlock the chest. With determination in his step, he ran straight to Grandpa Joe's house. "Grandpa, I'm going to find that key," he announced. Grandpa Joe raised his eyebrows, a playful smile on his face. "Oh, you think so, do you? Well, good luck, Tim. I've searched for that key myself for years with no luck. But if you want to try, I might give you a clue." Tim's eyes sparkled. "A clue? What is it?" Grandpa Joe scratched his chin as if recalling an old memory. "When I was younger, I used to bury small things in the garden. I always thought it was a safe place to hide secrets." The garden! Tim felt a burst of excitement. Without another word, he grabbed a small shovel from the shed and ran into the backyard. The rain from the day before had left the ground soft and damp. Grandpa Joe's garden was wild and beautiful, full of blooming flowers, buzzing bees, and an old apple tree that stood proudly in the center. Tim decided to start digging near the apple tree. He carefully pushed the shovel into the soil, digging small holes so he wouldn't disturb the roots. After a few minutes, he heard a soft clink. His heart raced as he dropped to his knees, brushed away the dirt with his hands, and uncovered a small, rusty metal box. "Grandpa, I found something!" Tim shouted as he ran back into the house, holding the box like it was made of gold. Grandpa Joe looked both surprised and delighted. "Well, well, let's see what you found." Tim carefully opened the box. Inside, nestled in a small piece of cloth, was a rusty, old-fashioned key. Tim's eyes shone as he held it up. "It has to be the key to the chest." Grandpa Joe clapped his hands together. "Well done, Tim. You did it." Tim hurried to the chest, his heart pounding. He fit the key into the lock and turned it. There was a soft click, and the heavy lid creaked as he lifted it open. What he saw inside made him freeze in wonder. The chest wasn't filled with gold coins or sparkling jewels. Instead, it held hundreds of old photographs, handwritten letters, postcards from distant lands, and small trinkets. A carved wooden elephant, a tiny ship in a glass bottle, and a colorful mask. Is this the treasure? Tim asked, confused. Grandpa Joe nodded, his face soft with emotion. Yes, Tim, this is my treasure. These are the memories of my life, a life full of love, adventure, and stories worth sharing. Grandpa Joe pulled out a black and white photograph of a young man standing proudly in front of a tall ship. That's me, Grandpa Joe said with a smile. I was 20 years old and about to sail across the Atlantic Ocean to America. It was the beginning of the biggest adventure of my life. Tim's eyes widened. You sailed across the ocean? Weren't you scared? Of course, Grandpa Joe admitted. Adventure is always a little scary, but it's worth it. Life is meant to be explored. For hours, they looked through the chest together. Grandpa Joe told Tim about deserts with golden sands that stretched for miles, jungles so thick you couldn't see the sky, and markets full of colors, sounds, and spices. He told him about the people he met, the lessons he learned, and the places he would never forget. Tim found a stack of letters tied with a red ribbon. What are these? He asked. Grandpa Joe's expression softened. Those are letters I wrote to your grandmother, Mary, when I was far from home. She was my greatest treasure of all. Tim carefully opened one letter. The paper was yellow with age, but the words were clear and full of love. Grandpa Joe had written about his adventures and how much he missed Mary. Tim could feel the love in every sentence. By the end of the day, Tim understood what Grandpa Joe meant by treasure. It wasn't gold or jewels. It was the stories, the memories, and the moments shared with the people you love. That night, as Tim lay in bed, he thought about his grandfather's life and all the adventures he had shared. He decided that he too would start his own treasure chest. It would hold his drawings, small souvenirs, and notes about his favorite days. Years later, Tim grew up and passed on the same lesson to his children. Life's greatest treasures aren't things you can hold in your hands. They're the memories you carry in your heart and share with the people you love most. And so, another treasure chest was born, ready to hold the adventures of a new generation. From time to time, Tim would still visit Grandpa Joe, even as he grew older. They'd sit together on the porch, watching the sunset behind the green hills, talking about new adventures Tim had experienced. And just like Grandpa Joe's chest, Tim's was slowly filling with memories worth sharing, moments that would become a story for his own grandchildren someday.